Hi, I'm Pastor Rhonda.
And I'm Pastor Seth.
You're listening to Growing Hope,
Living Faith.
Welcome back to Growing Hope, Living Faith.
Yes.
Thank you for listening. How are you doing today, Pastor Seth?
I'm going to be honest. Right now, I'm a little frazzled. So we have been sitting here for a while because I could not get the programs to work on my computer that we need to record. We're actually recording on your computer.
Yes, and I have no idea what's going on right now. But
I know she's been emotionally trying to encourage me, and I'm like pulling my hair out over here. It's actually it's good to have a hat on because I probably would be trying to pull my hair out.
Well,
but
I can't do much because this is so far over my head. I'm just looking at a computer screen with it's just like moving and there's lights blinking, and that's really over my head. So Pastor Seth is definitely the brains behind this podcast because I'm just a personality.
Like I said, I was about ready to, I don't know what I was going to do. I just couldn't get it figured out because I couldn't get it pulled up on my computer, and then we were trying to record on yours, and I couldn't get all the channels to record properly, and thankfully we got it figured out, at least to get us by this time, and hopefully next week we'll be all right, ready to go.
I was starting to think maybe we should just post like one of the previous episodes and like pretend.
Yeah. See if people remember. Ooh,
Yeah.
I had to try that one time. We just told them, so we can't probably try that now. So, well, good. Well, how are you doing?
I am a little bit tired, but
Yeah.
I'm good.
You've had a lot going on.
Yes, I was out of town last weekend preaching at Wrightsville Church of the Nazarene, and they were wonderful.
Awesome.
I was a little intimidated, a little afraid at first because the pastor said you have the whole service, and I panicked a little bit with that. But just to be able to share from God's word, and then also use some songs that I have co-written
awesome.
To kind of put in between the points and everything. And so that was really cool. I've never done that. And I don't know. I know that I was challenged by the message and I was moved. So I'm hoping that God did his work through the Holy Spirit, and maybe we'll see. I'm preaching again this weekend.
That's right. So you're prepping for this weekend, and going to be at Woodstock Church of the Nazarene.
Yes.
You are?
Yes, and I just love Pastor Lewis and his wife, Allison. They are very special, very sweet people, and I know Allison listens to the podcast.
Yes.
Hi, Allison.
Hello.
What's really funny is my daughter's name is Allison, and her husband, his name is Lewis.
Oh, wow.
So I'm talking about Allison and Lewis, and Eric is like, which one?
Yeah, you got to keep them straight. So, well, that's awesome. Well, I know I'll be praying for you this weekend, and hopefully everybody else will be praying for you as well, and excited to hear the reports of what God does. And that's what we do. We just offer it to God, give our gifts and talents, and he's got to take it and multiply it. So, and then on days like today where you can't get things straight and you're like, all right, God, I really need you to take my gifts and my talents and multiply them. No.
Right.
So today is episode 25.
I can't believe it. We are just
it's unreal. Hopefully we're, like I said, just going to keep on plowing away week in, week out. We'll see what happens. And, but today is episode 25, and we are going to continue on with lectionary passages. Last week, we kind of talked about how the passages maybe hit a little bit different. We weren't really, like I said, for the Sunday following after Easter, if you really just kind of look at it, you're like, man, what are these passages doing here? But they really, when you begin to kind of look at the bigger context, it really does begin to make sense. And I think this passage really begins to make sense as well. We're just going to focus on one today for you guys, and it's one that we're pretty familiar with, I think, on a pretty deep level. And there's even been programs essentially created kind of after this. So today we're going to be talking about the walk to Emmaus with the disciples, and
it really is about all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've never done an Emmaus walk. Have you done an Emmaus walk?
Yeah.
You've been heavily involved in that.
Yes. Well, at one point I was. Then I got so busy with church ministry, I've kind of had to put that on hold. But it's wonderful. If you ever get invited to go on the walk to Emmaus, go.
Yeah,
it is
cool
life-changing.
I haven't done the Emmaus walk, but I did what's called a Chrysalis walk, which is, I guess, for high schoolers or middle schoolers, high schoolers, as it's kind of like that pre-step before you go. And I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And So, you should go check it out. So we're going to be looking at the Emmaus walk. So we're going to be reading from Luke chapter 24. This is verses 13 through 35, and it reads like this. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. And when they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. And then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he asked them, "What things?" And they replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning. When they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were there with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. And then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" In the beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. And as they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. That part always makes me laugh. And it says, "But they urged him strongly, saying, 'Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over.' So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and he gave it to them. It says, then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. And they said to each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" In that same hour, they got up and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. And they were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed. He has appeared to Simon." And then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. Whew, made it through that.
Oh,
took a little bit, but we made it through it.
My goodness, what a
Yes.
story. What a story.
It's such a cool story. There's really a lot within this story that's essentially going on. And, it starts with, this is the same day, essentially, that, the tomb is empty.
Right.
They're making this journey.
Right. And they're going to Emmaus, and the scripture says it's 7 miles away. Can
Yes.
you imagine walking 7 miles? I thought about that, and I actually Googled, how long does it take to walk 7 miles?
How long
I'm just
is it?
curious. It's like 2 hours and 20 minutes at a leisurely pace.
Usually.
Yeah. So I would say they're probably in this deep conversation. So I would think that they're probably going fairly slowly. And I don't know what the path was like. I'm sure it wasn't like a paved path like what we would have to walk on.
Probably not, no.
But yeah, so they're walking, and so it looks like Jesus is kind of following them.
Mm-hmm.
And then he walks up to them and just strikes up this conversation, and they don't even know it's him.
Yeah.
And then these two guys were part of his movement. They were part of his disciples. Maybe they were in the 70 that he sent out to do these things, but they were part of the group.
Right. Yeah. And it says that their eyes were kept from recognizing him. So, but I imagine, they were so focused on the events and everything that had happened that they were so focused on that they just didn't even realize this is Jesus.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, they were so heavy-hearted.
Right.
When you're so focused and you're so downtrodden, you don't see clearly.
Yeah, and I think that happens to us today. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast that we have those experiences that as we go through things, sometimes it's so hard to see the trees for the forest. Is that the saying or something like that? Like we just
forest for the tree.
The forest for the tree. That's right. We get so focused on these just one aspect of our life when things aren't going the way that we want them to go, and we forget that Jesus is right there with us.
Right.
That's what's really, really cool about this is, there's all of these things that are happening with all the disciples, and they're all having some of these different experiences and all of this. And now here, essentially, Jesus is with them, but man, they are just so focused and downtrodden about what's going on in life and what has happened, that, man, they can't even see the reality that, you know what, Jesus is actually with them in this moment.
Consumed by the events of the day.
Yeah, and that's so easy for us, right? That's so easy for us to happen in life.
So, yeah, Jesus comes and he draws near. And I just think that's so cool that, you know, he's paying attention, that he's there and he draws near. But it's interesting when you look at this whole story, and we'll go verse by verse here in a second, but it's really this progression in relationship. Did you notice that when Jesus walks up to them, he's this stranger, you know, and then it progresses to where he becomes their friend because they invite him to the home.
Right.
And then it changes again when he like takes the lead and takes the bread and he becomes the host. So you see this progression. So kind of keep that in mind as we go through it. But here he's kind of the stranger, and then I love this part because it's as being a preschool teacher, I can so see why he did this, because I know just teaching preschoolers, sometimes you just ask these open-ended questions, just, you know, and then sit back and pretend like you don't really know the answers, and you just play along with it. But it's not unkind to do that, but he's just giving them a chance to voice what they're really thinking, and what, you know, he's getting them really to admit themselves what the problem is. Right,
absolutely. And, you know, I think so many times we want to help other people and we just jump in with these fixes, with these just trying to, you know, make situations better. But I think there's a beauty to this, that, you know, you ask questions and you listen, you know, and I think he listened, and he did that.
Yeah, he did. He said, "What are you discussing while you walk?" And I love this. It says, they stood still, looking sad. In other words, it just stopped them in their tracks, like, what? Excuse me? What did you just say? Like, are you the only person? Like, what rock have you been hiding under? You know, it's like, you are the only one. You know, they probably thought he was like weird.
Yeah,
you know?
I know, but I love this because it humanizes Jesus on a very, very deep level, right? I don't know maybe what tone he potentially used, but I like to think that it was a tone like, you know, that he's trying to play with him a little bit, you know, like obviously he knows what's going on, but yeah, so to me, this is such a cool passage because it really does, I think, humanize him. Because even when I was reading it, I said, man, I love that part. Like, he was just going to kind of continue on. But, you know, it just humanizes him.
It humanizes him. But again, he's God. But this is the resurrected Jesus. This is the humanized, resurrected Jesus. It's still a bodily resurrection.
Yeah. So they look sad, and then what happens?
Okay, so they're looking sad. They have these heavy hearts. And he says, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know these things? So, yeah, I mean, they're just like stunned, completely stunned. And then he's like, what things? Yeah. And then he says the things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people.
That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's almost like, go back a little bit to Palm Sunday when they said, who is this king? Who is this? And they're like, he's a prophet.
Right. Well, once again, they and they're going to say this here soon, but like, they've been with him. They've listened to him. They've journeyed with him. He has said he's the Messiah. He's coming to redeem Israel. He's coming to do all these things. But even in this moment, they're calling him a prophet, right? And so maybe they're scared, maybe they're afraid, maybe they don't know, maybe like there's still this.
I think the next verse tells us why.
Within them, yeah.
But, you know, he did, when you look at the role of a prophet, they speak on God's behalf, and they, raised the dead, they healed people. I mean, that's what Elijah, Elisha, Moses did, those kind of things as far as like speaking on the behalf of God. And so they knew that Jesus did that. You know, Jesus had spoken for God, and he had raised the dead, and he had done all of those things, but they just couldn't wrap their mind around the rest.
There's still this doubt. There's still this they don't get it. We know the end of the story. We know all the reality. But try to put yourself in their shoes.
Because I saw myself here at this part because we can know all about Jesus and not know him, and that was my testimony. I could tell you all about Jesus, but I didn't know him. Yeah. So it's, they know he's a prophet. They know he's mighty. They know all of these things that he was supposed to redeem Israel. But the problem, I think, is in the next one. Yeah. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. That's where you go, oh, you're not getting it. That's right. Yeah, you just sigh right there, because it's like, even though they knew these things, they had their ideas, their hopes, their dreams on what they thought he should be, and who he should be, and what he should be doing.
For sure, yeah. To me, it's so easily relatable, I think, to us on such a deep level. It's easy sometimes for us to, once again, we have those preconceived notions, and we've talked about those preconceived notions on a very, very deep level many times before, but, they were looking for that military conquering power, and so that's like, that's what we were hoping for. And now, he's dead, and
our hope died with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were hopeless. And then beyond that, now his body is gone. Essentially is what is the next part that they're getting to. And so it's not just that, our hope was dead. The body is gone and he's alive, but we're going to continue on.
Right. So in verse 22, this just gets me when he says that he's talking about the women.
Yes.
Moreover, some women of our group astounded us, like they shocked them, like they were flabbergasted, just a loss of explanation, overwhelmed. But they say that it's a vision of angels. Did you catch that? When they did not find his body there, they came back and told us they had indeed seen a vision of angels. And I'm like, I don't think that's what Mary said. I think Mary said, I have seen the Lord, not a vision of the Lord, but the Lord. So I was like, really? But they had seen, and really, this is getting to the heart of, like, they don't know where he is, and I think that's their chief complaint. They don't know where he even went. And then Jesus finally kind of he emerges like with this. Okay, I've heard enough. Y'all have said it all, because I think he got to the heart, or they got to the heart of the matter by saying we had hoped that he would do this. And so now that they're at the heart of the matter, Jesus speaks up and says, "How foolish are you, and how slow of heart to believe." And when I first read that, I thought, maybe he's being a little harsh there, because, these guys really are just a product of what they've been taught.
Sure.
They didn't have like a Bible, of their own.
Yeah.
And he's pointing out, was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things unless they had been taught by the synagogue teachers, the rabbis, and, would they have known? But that's just not accurate thinking, because it says that they were part of this group. So they had walked with Jesus. They had, they were part of this number, may not be the 12, but they were part of this number. In fact, they were so important to Jesus, he had sought them out to correct their thinking.
Right. Yeah, it can potentially be deemed harsh, but I think it points to that, the other truth of the reality of the gospel. So he uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise or whatever. And so, the disciples, they had been thinking like everybody else, right? Like all the leaders in the synagogue, they had been thinking like everybody else. And so I think that's essentially what he's saying is like, hey, don't be foolish. Don't think like everybody else. The call of me, and the call of Messiah, and the call of all of this is to think differently. Like don't think like everybody else. Think differently.
And don't be selective. And I think this right here is a big warning flag for all of us, where he says that, was it not necessary for the Messiah to suffer these things? He says that these are the things that the prophets declared, and we do the same thing. We are selective with what we want to believe. We pick and choose our favorite scriptures, and we hear about the wonderful resurrection, but do we really want to think about the death? It's like we are selective. I mean, just like they were. And I think this is something that we need to check ourselves.
How did they not see that, though? Like, how did they not see, like, Jesus is going through all of Scripture, and he's talking about all these references, and they were probably like, who are you? We don't even know who you are. How do you know all this stuff? How do you know? Like, I mean, it's just pretty interesting to me that it's like they still have no idea that this is Jesus. But
Well, I mean, it says like in verse 27, that's the next verse. Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them things about himself. You would think that the lights, and it does say later that their hearts started burning
within. Yeah.
But I mean, he's going through all this stuff. But I mean, what I think he's doing is he's going through these scriptures, and he's pointing out the suffering servant. Like, you heard that I'm going to be victorious. Did you catch this?
Yeah.
I mean, look at Isaiah. It's like very specific. I am going to, suffer greatly, and it's all through scriptures. But nowadays you hear people say that we don't really need the Old Testament because, it's not relevant today, but it so is, because we see Jesus, that's like a lens. We see Jesus in all of it, and it all makes sense. Right. I think the saying is, Jesus is concealed in the Old Testament and revealed in the New, but that's what he's doing. And I just think it's so beautiful that Jesus would take the time. I mean, at any time during this 2.5 hour walk, he could have said, "Hey, y'all, it's me." Yep. And, he could have done any of those things, but he knew they wouldn't appreciate that being revealed until he took them to the truth first. That is big. We have to see the truth. We have to embrace the truth before, he can really reveal himself.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
But all the scriptures, that little word "all" packs a punch.
Sure does. Yeah, and once again, this next part is just so fascinating to me, and like I said, to me, it points to, I don't know if he was toying around with them or whatever, but I don't know.
I think I have a thought on that. He's not going to be forceful. He's not. Good. He's a gentleman. I mean, he's not going to say you have to, do anything. Right. I mean, this is free will. So he's letting them exercise their free will because he's given them the truth, and their hearts are burning. And, now it's like the ball's really kind of in their court.
It's good. Yep. Because he's going to continue on, right? They've made it to where they wanted to make it.
Because it's getting dark.
It's getting dark.
And he's like, at night.
Yeah, because bad things happen at night in the dark. And so he's going to continue on. And that's when they, verse 29, they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us," because it's almost night. And he's like, "All right, I guess I'll stay with you." And so he goes in with them to be able to stay with them.
And that's where the relationship changes.
Changes, right? Begins to take a change. And then they sit down at the table to eat together, which is that's a very relational type change as well, that there's this, it's a family feel now, right? We talk about the table a lot in church because it creates this family environment that we all come to the table. And so they sit down at the table and he breaks bread.
Yeah. And the fact that he did it,
yep.
It's like the relationship just changed again because now he's host, because normally the head of the house would do that, would do the honors.
Yep.
But he took the bread and he blessed it and broke it.
And it says immediately, like as soon as he broke it and he gave the bread to them, it says their eyes were opened and they recognized him.
I've read so much about that this week. That was when his hands were visible at the table and he broke the bread. They saw the scars. But also, I mean, this is exactly what he did at that Last Supper. Right. The disciples had to have talked about how meaningful that was. I personally think that when he broke the bread, it all started making sense because the scripture that he was pointing out was the pieces about him being broken and about his death and about, he says, didn't you see that, he had to suffer? Yep. And I think in the breaking, this is my body given for you. Yep. And it's just so
Yeah. Beautiful. I think their minds would have definitely went back to that Passover meal. If they weren't there, then they obviously would have heard about it. And so, there is this breaking of the bread, and, at the Passover meal, what does Jesus say? Every time you break bread, you do it in remembrance of what's getting ready to happen. And so, there, to me, it is very, very much a pointing to a remembrance of the sacrifice. It's a and it's, to me, it's like all of the dots really begin to connect for these guys, that all of this is connected, and this, him dying on the cross and the suffering that essentially he went through, it was done to be able to defeat evil, to be able to defeat sin. He, in that, he did all of those things. And so now we participate in the breaking of bread. Now it's that closer draw to him. It's about that closer relationship. It's about making him the host of our life. It's about, it's a lot of those different things. But yeah, I think that all of that realization came together in that one moment. And then they truly began to see Jesus of, man, this is who he is, and this is what this was all about. But what's it's so interesting what happens after that, because it says, then he vanishes from their sight.
From their sight doesn't mean that he vanishes.
Yeah.
Well, it probably does, but my curious mind is like, did he just pull a veil? now you see me, now you don't.
Yeah.
And listen to see if they were getting it, and maybe he would have intervened if they were, still in question.
Yeah, that's a great question. But it's pretty fascinating because you start out the trip, they can't see. They don't see Jesus. Jesus is there with them, right? Jesus is there with them. He's journeying with them. But their eyes, they can't see. And now they have this moment, and they finally actually see Jesus. They see the breaking of the bread for what it really, really is. They see the table for what it really, really, really is, and the call and the good news and how all that is placed upon their lives. And then all of a sudden, as soon as they can see and they have this moment, it's like, all right, now Jesus just isn't almost physically. You know what I'm saying? And that potentially could have been disheartening as well, right? Because they could have been like, oh, is our mind playing tricks with us? Like what's really, really going on here?
And I think that's when they said, no, our minds aren't playing tricks on us. Because remember when we were listening to that, didn't our hearts burn?
Yeah.
And, I'm always talking about my favorite author, the H. Lamar Smith, but I read something he wrote, and I'm sure I've used it on the podcast, but he talked about how mercy melts hearts. And, it's like when they started seeing that he was so merciful, that that was the heat that was burning. It was that realization of he is this king of mercy.
Yeah. And they realize they have to do what the women did.
Yeah.
Isn't that fun thing? Yeah.
Yes, because here's the thing. When you really encounter and you really see him as the Lamb, and you really get a good look at who he really is, you're transformed. You can't unsee it. You just can't. And you respond by telling others. And that's exactly what they did, because now they had to go back at night in the dark, the 2-hour something trip, but I bet they did it faster this time.
I bet they were scooting down the road. But they had to get out of their comfort zone because they didn't want to keep on traveling at night. Or maybe it was just that they were where they're at, but they had to get out of their comfort zone to be able to travel that road, which would have been hard. It would have been, like you said, it would have been dark, the terrain. They maybe have, I'm sure there were rocks and stuff they had to watch out for. They may have stubbed their toes. They may have done all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
They didn't have Jesus.
Really, that was a walk of faith.
Yep. On a very, very
because in 2 hours' time, they could have talked themselves out of it. Did that really happen? So that was a big walk of faith.
Well, like I said, they talked about the women earlier, that the women astounded them. It's almost like they didn't. I don't know if they fully believe the women per se. You know what I'm saying? Like, and now they are going to be the ones that are in the spots of the women, that they are now going to go and tell this story. Yeah. Are people going to believe us? Are people going to really connect to what we're saying and how we're saying it? Are they going to? And just like we talked about last week, this mentality of seeing and believing, and those who don't believe without seeing, they're more blessed. Like, it's this mentality of, man, now there's this inner struggle of we've had this experience. We've seen Jesus. We've experienced the broken bread and the blood, we'll say. And now, like I said, what now? What do we do with this? Yeah. What is going to be our response now that we've had this experience, and we've got to share it with other people? And so they go back and tell the disciples.
Because it's so big. He's alive. And like I said last week, the Romans know how to kill people. He was really, really dead. And now they saw him. And really, it's so hard to stop the story here, because if you read a few more verses past the text, they're all back, together. And then Jesus shows up again. And, I can just imagine them going, there he is. Because they're so... their lives have been changed. Yeah.
And they're in tune. They're in tune now, you know. And so it's, like I said, it's such a fascinating story. And even that end part, we should relate to that. I think we should relate to that we have had experiences with Jesus, right? We've experienced this broken bread and this blood that has been spilled for us. And so, what do we do? And it's so easy for us sometimes to be scared, once again, to go and share the faith, to say the journey is too hard. I can't get from here to there very easily. And so I'm not going to take that journey. It's so easy for us to say, man, people aren't going to believe me, or what are people going to think, or what are people going to, it's so easy for us to say, all of these different types of things. Sometimes it's easy for us to say, well, I don't know where Jesus is at in this moment. I don't feel him with me. I'm not experiencing his true presence right now. And so I don't know where he's at. So I don't know if that means that I'm not doing what God desires for me to do or whatever. And so we get so caught up in a lot of these things. And sometimes the reality is we've just got to share. We got to be willing to share. We've got to be willing to talk about it. We've got to be willing to do a lot of those things, and not in ways that, elevate us and put others down, but they went back with a message. It's not, oh man, Jesus came to us. Whether they did say that, but it's he's alive, right? That's the message. He is alive, and this is how we know that he's alive, is we've experienced this broken bread and this spilled blood.
And again, he chose as the least likely to do, like he appeared to the women, he knew that women were not considered like a credible witness, and these two people obviously they're not super important either, because one person is not even named. Yeah. That brings me such comfort to know that, he will use anyone.
If they're willing.
Yeah, if they're willing. Even if they're misguided in their thinking, he will reveal himself.
Yep, absolutely. And he desires to reveal himself.
Yeah. That's why he tagged along.
That's it. But we got to be in tune. We got to be willing to listen, I think, to the things that he's telling us. And, that's a big part of holiness, and what we believe holiness to be is that journey. And it's a process that we go through. And so, my hope for you guys is, as we've kind of been talking about this passage, is maybe you saw yourself at different points in the story right now, and we just want you to know that you truly can experience the broken bread and the spilled blood, and the table is big and the table is vast, and you don't have to have all the answers right, and because these guys didn't have it figured out, you know what I'm saying?
Just be willing to let go of the image and the person that you think Jesus should be. What makes sense, because he doesn't make sense.
And let Jesus be Jesus, right? Like I don't know. It's just so crazy, but there is something to this good news, that as we share this good news, the broken body, the spilled blood, death has been defeated, sin has been defeated, evil has been defeated, and man, we can have relationship with the one who defeated that.
That's great. That's amazing. That's
so good. So be encouraged this morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to this. Man, be encouraged, and just know that we're praying for you on this journey. And there's a lot of other people that need to hear the good news on a deep level.
Don't do this alone.
Don't do it alone, right? And there's a lot of people that need to hear the good news. And so, man, don't be afraid to share the good news and the reality of the broken body and the spilled blood.
That's right.
And that's what, if we go to the Acts passage, that's what Peter does, right? And because it's all about the Pentecost. That's what Peter's doing. He's saying, hey, this is what needs to happen. This is how you can experience the broken body and the spilled blood. Man, so good.
Everyone.
It's for everyone. That's awesome. Well, we pray and hope that you have enjoyed this. If you want to reach out to us, you
email us.
Yeah, you can email us at growinghopelivingfaith@gmail.com, or the podcast. Or on the Facebook.
Yeah, we have a Facebook page. It's Growing Hope Living Faith Podcast.
Yeah.
On Facebook. So, reach out to us and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So, thank you all so much for listening. Know we're praying for you. Grace and peace. God bless. And bye-bye.
Welcome back to Growing Hope Living Faith. We are glad that you are listening to us today. Oh, I hadn't done this in a while.
We're keeping that one too.
Okay, here we go.
All right. And it comes from Luke 24, 13 through 35, and it reads like this. Now, on that same day, two of the men, already messed up. So we're going to pause right there.
You're listening to Growing Hope Living Faith, and thank you for listening and journeying. I can't say that word ever.
No, why not?